the first thing to say is really that there's a lot of statistics surrounding why e-learning isn't sort of picked up and why it doesn't succeed. Towards Maturity did a survey, and they said 67% of the reasons behind failure of e-learning is all about failure of learners to pick it up. And it's a sad thing, but there's a lot of bad content out there that's, maybe looks poor, isn't engaged, isn't designed well in terms of instructional design, and even worse, a lot of this content is related to compliance. So if you think about it from a just purely logical perspective, if you're going into a compliance course, the learner's not going to turn around and say, oh fantastic, I'm doing a compliance course. If they're starting at a place of negativity and they're met by something that looks like it was built 5 years ago and is absolutely turgid, then you're fighting an incredibly losing battle from the word go. It is important to say that simple approaches to e-learning are fine. In some cases where you're just trying to transmit a piece of information, it's dead simple. Then something that's more akin to a PowerPoint with a quiz on the end of it might have a place. But when you're trying to get a learner to kind of stop, reflect, genuinely learn, then you need to take an approach that is more sophisticated than that engages them. So, I guess again, first thing to say is it's not uncommon to see corporate customers struggling with developing e-learning in-house, and I think it's fundamentally about underestimating what you need to do to kind of develop the skills of your internal teams to do that. Great content. When you come to an external provider, for example, the teams that you're working with, they'll have expert instructional designers, graphic designers, developers, project managers, QC people. And the reality is, when you're working with an internal team, it's unlikely you're going to have all of those skills across the board. So there's a big difference between the two, and recognising that and recognising where you can get to with your internal team, I think is an important thing. I think fundamentally what it's really about is recognising that and being open to the idea of working with an external provider to help you develop your internal skill sets. And we've done this 4 times in the last 3 or so years. And the solutions we've provided have kind of had 5 components throughout that are much more than, if you Google, for example, ID training or Captivate training or storyline training, you'll be told you can go and do a course on storyline, and you might be foolish enough to think after that 2-day course you'll become an expert in e-learning and suddenly be able to produce fantastic e-learning. The reality is very different.